What we see here on the screen are two newspaper articles, and both these newspaper articles talk about a similar issue, that is the issue of child marriage. Even today we find our newspapers and various kinds of other printed media or visual media filled with news about child marriages, about women's harassment. Women are subject to discrimination and oppression to a certain extent in today's society as well. And we are all very aware of women's position in the society. Now let us start discussing something in the same line. If women are subject to harassment, oppression, discrimination in today's world, can you imagine what must have been the condition 200 years ago? That is to say, if we now time travel 200 or 300 years back, we will see that women were relegated to an absolute marginalized position in the society. Women were not given the space to go out in the public sphere. Women were instead confined within the domestic space. Various kinds of evil practices were perpetrated and perpetuated against women. So what we will be focusing on in this lesson is women, caste and reform. And to be very specific, we will be discussing how various kinds of evil practices were prevalent in the Indian society in colonial times and how reform movements came into being to eradicate those practices, those evil social customs from the society. But a very important question that arises in this regard is that when so many kinds of evil practices and social customs have been prevalent in the society for several centuries, and when all these customs and practices have been revered and considered sacrosanct by the Indian population, how did changes suddenly come about? It is not possible to bring about change in any society, to overturn any social order in just a matter of a day or two. So what do you think actually provided impetus to social reform in the Indian society? Well, credit goes to new developments like the communication system as well as the introduction of print. Now we know that the Britishers had come to the Indian subcontinent as a trading company in the 17th century, and subsequently in the 19th century British colonial rule was established in the Indian subcontinent. With the establishment of the British colonial rule, with more and more Britishers making their way to the subcontinent, Western education spread among the masses. And Western education actually opened up new avenues, new paths to question the existing social order. And so, various developments in the communication system helped in the spread of Western education, helped in the spread of reformist ideas among the masses. And then we have the introduction of print. Print media still continues to play a very crucial role in our lives because it is through print media that we get access to information on various things that are happening throughout the globe. And when the Indian masses were introduced to printed forms of media, they were now able to question their position in the society. They were now able to see the old things in a new light. So these kinds of developments actually provided impetus to social reforms in the Indian subcontinent between the 19th and the 20th centuries. But it was not just the Britishers who played a crucial role in bringing about social reform in the society, because the Indians had to begin from the roots. Now, many Indians were inspired and influenced by Western education, and this group of educated Indians understood the seriousness of the situation. They understood the backward condition that the Indian society was enmeshed in. Different kinds of evil practices like polygamy, child marriage, sati, or even the abolition of widow remarriage had actually pushed the Indian society to the clutches of darkness and ignorance. And these educated Indians now took it upon themselves to bring about reforms in the society, to bring about change in the truest sense of the term. And while we talk about the contributions of these educated Indians, mention must be made of Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Jyotirao Phule, Ram Mohan Roy, Dayananda Saraswati, among many. So now we will be focusing on the contributions of some of these educated Indians who attempted to change the existing social order in the subcontinent. We begin our lesson with a discussion on Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, since his childhood, was exposed to Western education, and Western education actually helped him understand the flaws in the Indian society. He learned that various practices which were believed to be sanctioned by the religions were actually flawed. Those were discriminatory in nature. Those practices like child marriage, sati, widow immolation, or even polygamy were pushing the Indian state to a period of darkness, to the clutches of ignorance. And the masses were deluded because they held all these practices to be sacrosanct. The masses were made to believe for many generations that these practices were at the foundation of the Indian society, which is why these practices kept on happening for many centuries and down the lines of the generations. And so it was this exposure to Western education that helped Raja Ram Mohan Roy to now take on the responsibility of bringing about changes in the society. To this end, Ram Mohan Roy began a campaign against the practice of sati in the early 19th century. Now, what do we understand by this practice called sati? By this practice called sati, a woman after losing her husband had to put herself in the pyre of her deceased husband. That is to say, she had to burn herself to death in the funeral pyre of her deceased husband. Now, this is what has been happening to the widows in the Indian subcontinent for many centuries. And this illustration here shows you what this practice of sati was actually all about. Here we see the funeral pyre, which was the funeral pyre of this woman's deceased husband, and simply on account of losing her husband, this woman had to put herself to death in that burning funeral pyre. And this was the practice of sati. And this practice was a social evil. Why would a woman have to kill herself on account of losing her husband? And Ram Mohan Roy became aware of how wrong and negative this practice of sati was, which is why he began a long campaign against the practice of sati. But you must be thinking that it was really easy for Ram Mohan Roy or even the other social reformers to bring about changes in the society. Well, at this juncture, we need to keep in our minds that the society was in the clutches of these orthodox and conservative ideas that sanctioned these evil practices. And so the masses did not really want to bring about changes in the society, which is why reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy actually had to fight a lot. And Ram Mohan Roy also received help from the then Governor General of British India, that was William Bentinck. Now finally, in the year 1829, a legislation was made with the help of William Bentinck that made the practice of sati illegal. So sati from this point of time now began to be an illegal practice in the Indian subcontinent. Now this was a major achievement of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Because for many centuries, women have been having to put themselves in the funeral pyre of their deceased husbands. But now, this practice of sati was made illegal in 1829. Ram Mohan Roy was also against various orthodox ritualistic practices that were sanctioned by religion. He was also against the idea of idolatry. Idolatry means the worship of idols, and he believed that it is idolatry. It are those ritualistic practices that perpetrate discriminations and oppression in the society. And so he was against this practice of idolatry or worshipping the idols. In 1828, Ram Mohan founded the Brahma Sabha, which was later known as the Brahma Samaj in Calcutta. Now the Brahma Samaj fought against a lot of social evils. Before proceeding with this lesson and learning about what was propagated by the Brahma Samaj, let me ask you a question. When was the Brahma Samaj founded by Raja Ram Mohan Roy? Was it founded in 1850, 1828, 1827 or in 1820? Well, the correct answer is 1828. The Brahma Samaj, that was initially known as Brahma Sabha, was founded by Raja Ram Mohan Roy in Calcutta in 1828. The Brahma Samaj followed the path of monotheism or belief in one God. So we learned that Raja Ram Mohan Roy was against the practice of idolatry. Instead, he propagated a belief system that is called monotheism. The followers of monotheism believe in just one God. So they do not have many idols to worship. They do not have very elaborate ritualistic practices to follow in the name of religion. Instead, they just believe in one God, in one spirit. So, the social reformer Raja Ram Mohan Roy had founded the Brahma Samaj to get rid of various social evils. And those social evils would include polygamy. Polygamy means the marriage of one person to many persons. And in this practice of polygamy in the Indian subcontinent or in different places of the world, one man used to marry several women. So here you can see how one man has many wives. And this was a very exploitative practice. It is this one man who exploited many wives. So this was seen as a social evil by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Next, he also wanted to discard the very evil practice of child marriage. Now, in this practice of child marriage, young brides were married off to quite elderly and senior grooms. And more often than not, these young wives lost their husbands quite early. Then another thing that the Brahma Samaj propagated was the property right of women. So earlier on, women did not have any right to the property that was either owned by their husband or their father. So women were excluded from the properties, so to speak. But the Brahma Samaj and Raja Ram Mohan Roy wanted to bring about equality. Equality in the sense that men and women would now be seen and held on equal grounds. And so he wanted to bring about this reform that women would be allotted their property rights. The Brahma Samaj also wanted to get the society free of caste discrimination. It was this caste hierarchy that placed the Brahmanas at the top of the societal structure. And the Brahmanas as well as the other higher caste members exploited the members of the lower castes. And so this discrimination pervaded the Indian society for many centuries, and Raja Ram Mohan Roy wanted to get rid of this. Then the final practice that we come to is that of female infanticide. In this practice of female infanticide, female embryos used to be killed. Now this was done because a male child was preferred to a female child. A female child was seen as undesirable, which is why female embryos were killed. And so, as we can see here, these were very evil and ruthless and discriminatory practices. And so Raja Ram Mohan Roy tried his level best to get the society free from the clutches of these evil and orthodox practices. Raja Ram Mohan Roy left behind a great legacy, and in the year 1833 he died in Bristol in England. Here, if you visit Bristol sometime, you will be able to see the statue of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Here this statue stands with the pride with which Raja Ram Mohan Roy lived his life and wanted to bring about social reforms. So this lesson introduced us to a great social reformer, that Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and it was exposure to Western education that broadened his horizon, that enabled him to see the evils and the flaws in the Indian society. And so he wanted to abolish various kinds of evil practices like child marriage, polygamy, female infanticide. Now, we mentioned that he left behind a great legacy. In a subsequent lesson, we will begin our discussion with talking about how this legacy of Raja Ram Mohan Roy was taken ahead by another great social reformer who also hailed from Bengal. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.